Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of GOAT Movies, the podcast for the simple movie lover, where we discuss movies we've recently seen and see if they have what it takes to become the next greatest of all time. What makes a GOAT movie? Is it quotable? Is it lovable? Is it any-able? You'll find that out today and more. Get your Capri Suns and your Sunny D packs ready, because Red Rover, I'm coming over. We're discussing the movie Tag. On today's show, I have one of my good buddies, Nick Greco. What's going on, Nick?
Carlos, what's going on, man? Excited to be on the podcast. I feel like we've talked about it, man, since you started it, and we were able to hook up this time, so I'm excited to be on the show with you.
Exactly, and I'm so happy that we were able to discuss the movie that we went to go see together, Tag, which is a movie about friends, and you've been a good friend of mine for, going on almost 10 years now?
Yeah, just 8 or 9, so going on the better part of a decade, it seems.
That's a lot, especially with the fact that you and I are both in our 30s. That's a third of our life.
Right? Too long.
Right? And when I met you, you weren't married, you didn't have a kid, and all of that has changed.
Right? Now I'm married, I have a toddler, and we've got one on the way, so...
Congratulations, my friend. Spoiler alert for those who don't know.
Time doesn't slow down, and this movie was almost kind of a perfect movie for trying to find a way to stay young while everyone keeps getting older.
Well, going straight into that, we want to be talking about the movie Tag. This was sort of an anticipated movie. Based on the trailer, everybody was really excited to see it. It looked kind of stupid, I'm not going to lie. I wasn't too excited about it, but then I heard that it was based on a true story, which just kind of makes you want to see it even more. Now, based on my last podcast that was based on a true story, I didn't go into this with too high of a hope. But Tag is a small group of former classmates organize an elaborate annual game of tag that requires some travel all over the country. In and of itself, the movie is just about a couple of friends who get together throughout the year and keep this game of tag going for about 30 years. Nick, what kind of games did you play with your friends as kids?
You know what, Carlos? I was, me, and that I was a big baseball player, so it was a lot of different forms of baseball, whether it was tape ball, whether it was wiffle ball, in the front yard, down at the park, in the house. All kinds of variations of baseball games. You're throwing a ball and you're hitting it, and we played a lot of that.
You grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, right?
Yeah, here in North Richland Hill, so in the Metroplex.
So you still have a lot of those school friends that you've known since elementary school, right? Do you still keep in touch with a lot of those?
As we were watching the movie, I was thinking about some of my oldest friends, and I would say, so my oldest friend is Jimmy Cox, who you've met. And we were friends starting in 6th grade. So
shout out, Jimmy.
Going on about 20 years, I would say. And then I've got some really great friends from high school. A lot of my good friends now, like you, like Graham, some other people came later in life. But I would say my oldest friends are going on 20, 15 years or so. And a lot of those were through baseball. And, as we watched this movie, it was pretty funny because my good friend Sifo, who you've met also, earlier this week, he was off of work, and we went out and we had a catch at a high school field. And it was kind of funny, 2 30-year-old guys that can barely throw, but you do what you can to feel nostalgic and feel younger. So we went out, and he had to get special permission from his wife, but we went out and we had a catch, and it was fun, and it makes you feel like you're 15 again, which was a lot what funny? The movie is like.
Isn't that funny? When you're younger, you have to ask permission from your mom and dad to go out and play. And now as you're 30 years old, married, and have kids, now it's, honey, can I go out and play with my friend, please?
Right? I'll have to say this, though. Marion is usually pretty cool. Like, I didn't get much flack. I think half the time she wants me gone. So any chance she gets for me to get away from her, she's taking it. But she was pretty cool about letting us go out and kind of have this guy's night and see this late movie, and left her alone with Mia, the babe. So she was pretty easy on this one.
Well, Marion is a saint for sure, because she puts up with you longer than I could have ever.
I think that the thing that Marion puts up the most with me is our friendship. So
that's
whatever
true.
That means.
So for those of you who don't know, Nick and I have been friends for almost 10 years. And from what I understand from Marion is a lovable, dear friend. I love her to death. She tells me that throughout the thing about Nick and I is that Nick finds so much pleasure in tormenting me, and nobody can get under my skin and push my buttons faster than Nick. I'd say you have it down to an art.
It's pretty much an art. I can pretty much calculate it whenever I want to. And you give the reactions, and so it's when the reactions
works.
are bigger, that's when it's the most fun.
So Nick and I have been friends for a little over 10 years now, and we were just trying to decide exactly what we wanted to watch and what were the options this week, Nick, because we were having a hard time to decide things.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, it's been probably going on 2 months since you started the podcast, since we were trying to get together. And we don't really watch many movies with the baby, and so we don't get out much. And I typically don't know what's going out until I see a preview for it like a week before. So I'd seen this, which I thought looked really funny. I liked the cast. Gotti was an option, so it was between this and Gotti, and then kind of this indie movie, American Animals, I think it was. But pretty much
just while you're on
Gotti.
the story about Gotti, this is how good of a friend I am, all right, that I have to put up with somebody like Nick. Nick calls me up and says that he wants to be on the podcast. And for anybody who wants to be on the podcast, here's a little plug. All you have to do is shoot me an email over at goatmoviespc@gmail.com. That's goatmoviespc@gmail.com. We'll get you on the show. But Nick was wanting to be on the show, and I said, we could possibly go see Gotti. We could possibly go see something else. I actually had screening tickets to go see Gotti, and the one time that Nick is available, he says, you can't go see Gotti because it's my wife's birthday and we have to go watch it. So me, being the friend that I am, decide not to go to the screening. It's the first screening that I don't go to, and go figure, John Travolta, the man himself, the man playing Gotti, shows up at the screening. I gave up a chance to meet John Travolta for you.
You know what? That shows how good of a friend you are, Carlos. You came to, we were having people over for my wife's birthday, and you, hands down, like every other time, you say, all right, what time am I there? What are we doing? So you came over, and I think we found out while you were here on my couch, we saw a social post that Travolta was actually there. So that was frustrating, but I think it'll go down as a good story for the rest of our lives. We'll remember the time that you missed meeting Travolta so you could come to Marion's birthday.
And a thing that we should know about Marion's birthday is you baked all the goods.
I did. I was a good husband. I stayed up till like 3 o'clock at night the night before, baking cupcakes, trying to be as stealthy as I could. Marion's a bit of a snooper, so I think she knew a lot of
I was about to say, because you were all gung-ho about that you were baking all night and that you surprised Marion with this. How in the world did you surprise your wife baking at 3 o'clock in the morning when you have a one-bedroom somewhat loft with an open floor plan?
I think she heard a bit of the KitchenAid going, but she falls asleep. On any given night, she's asleep an hour or two before I am anyway, just because I stay up late. But I think she knew what was going on, and she saw the cupcakes. I tried my best to hide them, so I put some in the refrigerator. I put some in the oven, but she said the next morning she saw them. It was really funny. I blew up, you saw, had probably about 80 balloons blown up in our apartment, and Mia wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning and comes out. She heard me working, and she was real confused, like very excited at all the balloons that were out, but very much confused. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, I stayed up real late, and then kind of at the last minute decided that I want to try and have some friends over for her birthday. So you, like a good friend, came and missed the chance to meet Travolta himself, but you'll get your other shots, I guess.
Hopefully, one day soon. I guess this movie holds a really good place for me in my heart because, just like you said earlier, it's all about friendship and feeling nostalgic. And, you and I have had some pretty good experiences. The most notable, the one that your wife says we always talk about every single time that we get together. I was in a car accident a couple of years ago. I was visiting family up in Utah. You at the time were living in Utah, which I think is where you met your wife, correct?
Yeah, it was. I don't think that we had met quite yet, but it would have been right around that same time, living in Provo.
Yeah, so I am in a car accident by a mutual friend of Nick's and mine, Brian, shout out Brian, who does not know how to drive. And people who drive in Utah, I swear, it's insane. Anyways, we get T-boned. I end up breaking my right arm and am hospitalized for I was in the hospital almost a week, wasn't I?
I don't remember exactly, but it was a good while. Your stay was definitely extended.
That's for sure. I was supposed to leave the following day. That's right. The funny thing, and I'll never forget this, is that Nick is calling me. We're trying to get together to go to lunch. Nick calls me and I'm like, Nick, I can't go to lunch. I'm in the hospital. I was in a car accident and I broke my arm. And Nick the whole time, yeah, right, whatever, bro. So you want to meet Alvarado? Not Alvarado. What was the name of that place?
Beto's.
Beto's. That's
We
right.
call it Beto's, but it's actually Rancheritos.
There we go. So the whole time he's like, what time do you want to meet at Beto's? And I'm like, no, bro. I'm really in the hospital. I promise. Yeah, right, man. Yeah, right. Whatever. Hurry, because I got to get to work or whatever you were doing.
Yeah, I think
And then I told you, I was like, yeah. And then I told you, I was like, Nick, I'm not joking. I'm in the hospital. I'm in the ER right now. All right, man. I'm going to drive down there. And if you're not in the ER, I'm going to be really pissed.
I don't think you know this part of the story, Carlos. So I was at work. It was one of these call center jobs in Utah that I hated. I just had it just to have it. And so I kind of took it as an excuse to leave work. I told my boss, I was like, hey, man, I acted all excited. I was like, hey, man, my good friend just got in a car wreck. I've got to go like right now. I've got to go. He's in the hospital. I didn't say anything else. I just left. So I used it kind of as an excuse to just leave work. But also I wanted to come see if you were full of crap or not.
And I wasn't.
You weren't. But I did leave work right away to come to the hospital.
Yes, he did. And Nick came every single day. And it's funny because Nick always came around the time that it was time for my medication. And my lunch always seemed to be there when I woke up, but yet somebody had eaten my dessert and eaten some of my sandwiches. Wasn't that interesting, Nick?
Hey, you know what? It's the price you pay for having friendship there. The friend tax.
There we go. It's the friend tax. We'll call it that. So let's go ahead and start talking about the movie. Let's get the rating right out of the way. Nick, you've got a scale of 1 to 10. You can give 0.5, however you want to dish that out. So Tag, starring Ed Helms, John Hamm, Jake Johnson from New Girl, and Hannibal, what's his name? Hannibal, I can never pronounce his last name, Buress, and Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye himself from the Avengers. So, Tag, what do you give it on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being absolutely horrible, 10 being absolutely the bomb, GOAT movie for sure.
You know what, Carlos? I've been thinking about what I was going to give this one, and I think that I'm gonna give it a pretty stout 9. I really enjoyed myself. For me, this ranks up there with kind of your classic dude comedy movies like your Wedding Crashers. Like I could see this thing 3 or 4 times in the same week. It was funny. The cast was great. It was lighthearted, but still creative enough to where you didn't feel like it was the same old thing. You know, it's not the Avengers 7 or it's not Incredibles 2. It's not a remake. It was a pretty fresh take on a really funny story, and I think that they executed it pretty well. So I'm gonna stick with my 9. Not perfect, but it was definitely probably in the top 2 or 3 funny movies that will come out this year.
Awesome. That's actually a pretty good score. It's a little higher than I would give it. I'm going to give it a solid 8. There were some scenes in the movie that I just felt were a little too far-fetched. You know that this is a true story, and you know that the writers took a little bit of creative direction with it. It's kind of difficult to try to determine what these people actually did in real life and what was, you know, fiction. It was a little far-fetched in certain aspects of the movie, but let me ask you this. A, do you feel that you had such a good time because you don't go to the movies very often now that you're married and have children? And B, do you think it helped that you went to go see this with me? Because I honestly feel that if I had gone to go see it by myself, I'm a firm believer that the environment around you impacts the way that you enjoy a movie. For example, I went and saw a comedy not too long ago. This was pre-podcast, and it was absolutely horrible, but it was because the lady next to me would not shut the hell up. You and I had a really good time last night watching this movie, so do you think that impacted your rating of this movie in any way, shape, or form?
You know what? We had talked about that a little bit last night, and I don't know that it did. You know, it was very fun to get out kind of later than I usually do with my buds that I usually don't hang out with. In that setting, but we had just gone to see Solo about a week or 2 ago, so this is my second movie like in the last few weeks, which is unusual for us. So it is nice to get back in there. It's nice to go late to a movie like you don't really do anymore. But I would say that I was really a fan, kind of independently of the setting, going and seeing it with you, having that silly factor. But I just really thought it was funny. I don't know what else to say besides that. I thought it was done really well. I loved the cast. Ed Helms is one of my favorite. Nick from New Girl is one of my favorite.
You're a big fan of The Office. I know that about you. You're an even bigger fan of Seinfeld. So, but I think that's your quote unquote niche. You like that simplistic comedy, that comedy about nothing kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm much more of a, and you know me, you know that, I'm not really into the superhero stuff. I'm not into the big production stuff. I'm much more a fan of the movies that are simple productions that but have the great dialogue, have the great storyline. And so I think that this really plays true to that. It's not a huge production, not an Office blockbuster, but it's a funny story with a funny cast, and it's just a fun, silly movie. And I think that they did it well. Ed Helms is great.
Absolutely.
We do love The Office. We watch New Girl, so I love Nick from New Girl. And they kind of play the same characters, but I think that it works.
Do you think that they're typecast at all for those types of characters? Because Ed Helms plays the same type of person in what's that other movie? The Hangover. He plays a dentist in The Hangover, and in this movie he plays a veterinarian.
Yeah, so kind of similar. And you know what? I'm not into the movies enough to think that that's a bad kind of thing. I think that if you have a role that you're good at, then why not run with it? Nick from New Girl, I don't remember his real name. I just call him Nick from New Girl. Very much the same kind of character. Jake Johnson's very much, kind of the screw up. He's been divorced. He lost his business. He's kind of the dirty pothead guy. But he's a really funny, dirty pothead guy. And I think that it was hilarious in the movie because you have the characters in the Friends that are at different stations in life. So you have Ham, who's very successful, he's the CEO of this big business, getting interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. You have Ed Helms, who's kind of successful in his own right, but not to that level. Then you have the totally screw-up friend. Then you got kind of the neurotic friend that's worried that his wife is having all these affairs on him.
That's going to be Hannibal Buress playing in the movie, the neurotic.
Yeah, his character was really funny. And then I think that the movie was really great at having characters that weren't the main four group playing tag, but that were really great kind of supplemental characters. Like Isla Fisher was really funny as Ed Helms' wife, kind of how she is real passionate about their game of tag. One of my favorite characters was the guy that plays the stupid bartender, who's like their friend from childhood, but not really part of the game, but that really like wants to be in the game. That guy reminds me, he looks and sounds like my brother's friend Marcos. He's not a doofus like this guy was, but it was kind of funny because he looks and sounds like Marcos. But in addition to the main cast, you have kind of these funny characters that play little roles in the movie. I loved it all around. It was great.
Yeah, it was. I'm going to give it a solid 8. You give it a solid 9. I really want to get into detail about this movie, so I don't want to ruin anything. And here on Goat Movies, we don't do anything like that until we give the spoiler alert. So, Nick, let's go ahead and take a pause break real quick so that we can play the trailer for everybody. And afterwards, we'll go ahead and give the spoiler alert and get a little bit more into detail about this movie. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, here's the trailer for Tag.
Susan, you take Jerry to be your husband.
What's the difference between Episcopalian and Lutheran?
Episcopalians don't eat fish.
That's pescatarian. That's not a religion.
They're all fanatics. I don't know. You may kiss the bride.
I love you. Please tell me what's going on here.
Our group of friends has been playing the same game of tag for 30 years.
What?
For the entire month of May, every year, we play tag.
You got me.
You never know when someone's gonna pop up.
Congratulations, buddy. You're in. Doing great, Anna.
Our buddy Jerry, he's the best that ever played. And now he wants to retire.
Never been tagged. Just saying.
So who's it?
You can't touch this.
This is the year we get Jerry.
You can't touch this.
Synchronize your watches.
I don't know how to do that.
I don't wear a watch.
Time is a construct.
Some couples go on cruises, some couples go camping, some couples go to strip clubs and have gangbangs. And this is just what we love. This is our gangbang.
Wow. Seems like the game has really kept you guys connected.
All right. So good to see you. Come on. It's been a while since we've done this.
This game has given us a reason to be in each other's lives.
I think your dad would have really wanted you to be. Yeah.
Eat my,
Eat my dick. Balls.
But ice cream.
What?
He knows I'm lactose intolerant. He's taunting me.
All right, so there you have it. There's your trailer for Tag, the movie we're reviewing today. From this point on, this is your spoiler alert. Anything from this point on is fair game. So if you don't want the movie ruined for you, go ahead and pause it. Even though this is based on a true story, so if you know what really happened in the movie, or what really happened in real life, you know how the movie ends. But this is your spoiler alert, so let's get right into it. Right off the bat, Nick, you and I were laughing probably within the first 30, 45 seconds of the movie. I mean, it starts off with Ed Helms interviewing for a position of a janitor. And the supervisor is actually asking him why he wants to do this, and he calls it a bucket list. And his bucket list is to clean the quote-unquote urine of this man. And he holds up the Forbes magazine with a picture of John Hamm, who is this, I guess, successful entrepreneur kind of, he's like a pharmaceutical CEO or something, isn't he?
Yeah, it was like he's the CEO of it was kind of hard to understand, but he's the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company or a big insurance company that deals a lot with it. Either way, you have him on the cover of the magazine, and he doesn't say it right off the bat, but you kind of get that sense like something's already happening here. Like this dude is trying to become the janitor so he can tag the crap out of his friend, who I'm guessing is John Hamm.
And I love this scene here because he is trying to prove his eagerness to become a janitor, and that interaction between the supervisor and Ed Helms was just so funny. It was executed so well.
It was hilarious.
The supervisor asks him, so when can you start? And then he grabs the Coca-Cola off of the desk and throws it directly into the trash can. The Coca-Cola had not even been opened, and it's the supervisor's, and the supervisor's like, what the hell?
When can you start? I think I just did.
Exactly. And Nick, that's one thing I got to give it to you. You are one for the quips. You have a response for everything. I've never seen you not know what to say. And that's the type of comedy that you get in this movie, where these random people will say things and everybody has the perfect response that just ends in laughter.
Yeah, it was funny. It was a great opening scene. You get enough information to know. I think that's where we learn that he, is kind of a successful veterinarian. He's reading through his resume. He says here that you're a successful veterinarian. I want to know what the heck you're doing here wanting to be a janitor. And he tells him that it's one of his bucket lists. And so you get kind of the idea off the bat that we're about to get some tag action right off the bat.
And these guys will do anything to tag their friends. And so the whole premise of the movie is it's just that. It's a group of friends who have been playing tag for 30 years. Now, the nuance is that it is only in the month of May, and whoever
March.
is it...
Was it May
no,
or March?
May. It was May.
Okay, so like for 1 month, they're only playing tag.
Yeah. And whoever is it on the last day at midnight has to live in shame as being it for an entire year until the following May that they get to start over. And this entire time, they are trying to tag their friend, Jeremy Renner, who has never been it for 30 years. Now, the montage that follows this, when they start talking about this, before we get into that, I need to say this. The opening scene with Ed Helms So he becomes a janitor. He starts showing up to work with a fake mustache, a fake wig. And then we find Jon Hamm is being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. And you can tell that this interviewer, this reporter, she's not really into the story. She's kind of just doing it because she has to. Ed Helms walks in and starts dumping all the trash that's in the conference room. Jon Hamm has absolutely no clue who this janitor is. He just thinks it's another guy in his company. And then, boom, here we go. They're off. Ed Helms starts tagging Jon Hamm, but the way that Jon Hamm tries to exit the conference room it's a conference room made completely and totally out of glass. There's only one way in or out. Jon Hamm grabs his chair and flings it at the glass, trying to break it, and it bounces back and ends up knocking him out. And the reporter the entire time is just like, what the hell is going on here? Which was pretty awesome. And so then they end up getting into the elevator, and then that's when we finally, get everything revealed and everything told to us. And then the reporter ends up joining them, and that's kind of the whole premise of the whole movie, is that this reporter is following them, and she'd rather do the story on the tag than this successful Fortune 800 company. And he even said Fortune 800 company, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny how they introduced all of the characters. They introduced Ed Helms at the beginning. And then when they introduced Jon Hamm's character, he's kind of like walking down the hallway to the conference room for this interview. And he's giving himself kind of that success guy, pump himself up. Like, you're great. You're the best. You're the CEO of a Fortune 800 company, and the Wall Street Journal's here to do a piece on you. So you get the idea that he's, out of all of the friends, he's this one. He's that guy. He's giving himself success quotes. He's pumping himself up. Very much the CEO of a big company. So I thought it was funny how they established the characters. And then when they established the next one, which is Nick from New Girl, it was really funny there too. He's like smoking pot with his dad. So you get kind of off the bat too that he's the screw-off oddball guy, which I thought was really a great character for him. And he was really funny throughout the entire movie.
What I loved about Jake Johnson's character, when he's smoking with his dad, he's just talking about how much his life has changed since his wife died. And then his dad tells him, she didn't die, she left you. And then we find out that, no, she's not dead.
She's dead
they're
to
just
me.
Divorced.
And
exactly.
He says
and that was
probably half a dozen times in the movie. My wife died. She's dead to me.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's your type of person. You have that type of quip. I remember when I first met Nick, he would see a beautiful woman and he's like, you know what's wrong with her? Her last name's not Greco. I was just like, oh my gosh, what kind of person says this type of crap? You, Nick, that's what type of person.
I take that as a compliment.
Yeah, and you should, because you are one of a kind, that's for sure. Now, the one thing I do need to say, and this is where I kind of started, I don't know, this is what kind of, I don't want to say it ruined the movie for me because it didn't. I was very pleased with the movie. Ed Helms' character, yes, he's a veterinarian, but he buys a ticket for himself to fly out to go meet his friend Jon Hamm, and he's taking time off from I'm assuming he works for himself. He's got to have his own practice because he's gone for almost the entire month, right?
Yeah, I think that in the interview at the very beginning, he says that he's got his own successful veterinary practice, I think.
I must have missed that part, but forget that. So he takes time off. He flies out to whichever city that Jon Hamm is in. Then he buys, and he's flying around with his wife. Keep in mind that they fly out to Jon Hamm City. Jon Hamm, Ed Helms, his wife, fly to Denver, Colorado to find Jake Johnson's character. And then they fly Jake Johnson, Jon Hamm, and all these people together then fly to go find Hannibal Buress's character. And then all of those people fly to find Jeremy Renner's character. So right off the bat, these guys have already spent a couple of $1,000s just in travel alone. So what the hell? And you know that Jake Johnson's character spends all his money on pot. So you know he's not paying for any of this stuff. So you know they have to be paying for him.
Yeah, I'm sure that, that part, I didn't think that part was that crazy. I mean, they're guys that are established, and we know that Hamm and Helms' characters are successful. You have the part in the movie later where we'll get to it, where they're like waterboarding the guy to find out where their friend is, and Hamm pulls out like $2,500 in cash out of his pocket. So I didn't find that part that far-fetched. They do talk about how their other friend, the neurotic guy, he's got to take 2 weeks unpaid vacation so that he can do that. And they're like, oh, it's only a week. What are you doing? He says, man, after this, I'm going ziplining too. It's definitely a Hollywood plot, but I didn't think it was that far-fetched.
Talk about suspending disbelief. That's for sure. Now, before we go any further, which one of the characters did you most identify with?
I think that I'm John Hamm, but I think that I'm really Nick from New Girl, or a little bit of in between. I think that I'm trying to be the successful. I'm trying to be a positive business guy. But half the times I don't even know what I'm doing. So I'd say I saw a little bit of myself in all of them. I think that's what one of the beautiful things about a movie like this is you get a little bit of everything in these characters and you try to identify to them. I think that Ed Helms' character was really relatable. He's trying the one that's trying to keep the group together. I feel like that a lot of the times with different circles of my friends, everyone goes off and does their own thing, and you try your best to keep the crew together, if nothing else for yourself, to feel like you still have a little bit, whatever memories you had with them left. So I would say you see a little bit of yourself in every character.
That's for sure. You do see a little bit about yourself. And I think we all would want to be the John Hamm character, because I think I would say that he's the most successful one since he's on the cover of a magazine. If I had to assign you a character, I would definitely, based on your positivity, because you get along with everybody, I would say you're the Ed Helms.
I could see that. He has a great character. He's the kind of the glue to the group, and he's the one that gets the game going. He tells them that their friend is quitting, so the guys get real into it. So like I said, I see a little bit of myself in each of the characters. I don't know which one I would choose you as.
I honestly think I'd be the neurotic one. The one that's trying to think of everything. Because not only that, but he's the one that did the least. Like, there's a scene where they've cornered Jeremy Renner, they've locked all the doors, and Barres' character is just sitting on the other side of the door with his back to the door, not paying attention on what's going on, and he's just eating a bag of chips. Do you remember that part?
I do. When that was in the AA meeting.
So I know we're jumping around a lot on this movie, but there's really not too much to discuss except specific scenes, because again, the whole movie is just about this game of tag. Now, you mentioned Ed Helms' wife in this movie. She was the one character I could not stand in this movie. I feel like she didn't really have a role. She was just kind of thrown in there to have another character. And honestly, just think about it. If she wasn't in the movie, would it have changed your outlook?
I don't think it would have changed my outlook. It would have still been a great movie. But for me, she was a funny kind of supplemental character. She's there, and I liked her because I think that she always plays kind of the crazy. Like in Wedding Crashers, she was, Christopher Walken's crazy daughter and Vince Vaughn's crazy love interest, and I like her as kind of that off the cuff, crazy redhead that's got that fire, and I thought she was funny. So that was just me. Not really an important role in the movie, but I thought the spaces that she comes in and she's kind of a psycho. She's driving them around. She's like the getaway driver. I thought that was funny.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because we first meet her as John Hamm, and Helms' character find Jake Johnson's character. Mm-hmm. She knocks on the door. He opens it and realizes that it's his best buddy's wife, and was like, what are you doing here? And all she says is, oh, I was in the neighborhood. I wanted to come and see how you were. And then he turns around and asks his dad, quick, what month is it? And he realizes that he is smack dab in the middle of the last game of tag.
And then you get an idea of how serious they take it, because he just trucks her. He runs straight through her, knocks her over. She's a petite girl, and he takes off for a beeline down the stairs.
He headbutts her, doesn't he?
Yeah, he just runs right through her, and you get another pretty funny chase tag scene where you get an idea of how serious these guys are. He's running through different people's apartments. He's climbing the stairs, running down the stairs. I think he's on a swing rope one time, and then he takes that.
No, it wasn't a swing rope. He was swinging off of cables, like electric cables and television cables. If you ever saw the movie, the new James Bond movie, the first one, not Casino Royale. Was it Casino Royale?
Yeah, I think Casino Royale
was the first
new one.
Yeah, if you ever see him where he's running, and he's doing this crazy parkour and stuff like that, that's what happened. He's this, Jake Johnson's character is running through apartments. He's jumping from building to building, but you have to remember that this is an overweight 30-plus-year-old guy who is stoned out of his mind. And what I loved about this is I kind of got glimpses of other movies throughout this one particular movie. So Jake Johnson's character takes a puff of his joint, and it's like the scene with Bradley Cooper in, what was that one where he took the miracle drug?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
I don't remember, but I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Limitless.
So what was it?
Limitless.
Yeah. So it's like in Bradley Cooper's movie Limitless, Jake Johnson's character takes a big puff of the joint, and all of a sudden he like sees clearly, but it's just ridiculous because now he's just stoned and he's running away from Ed Helms' character. And Ed Helms' wife in the movie, she is like, she's got I don't know if it's a broken nose, but you can see blood coming out of her nose. And this movie was just laughs and laughs after that. So then we come across, they finally tag Jake Johnson, and they're talking about how they need to, this is the year that they're going to get Jeremy Renner's character. And they have to go pick up Hannibal first, and they're all hidden in a closet while he is in therapy with his therapist. It's like, how did you even get into the therapist's office? How did you even know that he was going to be there? And that's another thing that I really didn't like, is that they spent so much time showing how much effort they put into finding Renner's character, but they didn't really talk about how they found each other, all the other characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that didn't bother me too, because you get the sense right from the beginning that kind of the whole plot of the movie is how they're going to get their friend Jesse, who in the 30-year game has never been tagged. And so you see how they meet each other, and you see, you get enough to get the characters developed, but you understand right off the bat that the whole premise of the movie is how are these guys going to tag their friend Jesse, who has like never been tagged.
Jerry.
In the whole
His name is
years.
Jerry in the movie.
I thought it was Jesse in the movie, and his name's Jeremy in real life.
No, his name in real life is Jeremy Renner. He plays Hawkeye in the Avengers, and his name in the movie is Jerry Pierce.
Oh, I thought it was Jesse. Either way.
No, it's Jerry. I promise. Ed Helms' character is Hogan Hoagie Malloy. John Hamm plays Bob Callahan. The whole time they're calling him just Callahan, which is another thing that I thought was really cool. In high school, I was called Mormon. That was my name. I was the only Mexican Mormon that people knew. I'm Mormon. I'm huge. I'm a big guy, so everybody called me Mormon. Hey, Mormon. Hey, Mormon. Did you have any nicknames growing up, Nick?
No, you know what? I was just always Greco for the most part. From baseball, I was telling my wife earlier a story today. When I was 14, the travel team that I was on, we had 3 Nicks on the team. So one of us was Nuke, one of us was Kelpsis, that was his last name, and I was just Greco. And so most of my friends, either from church where they're calling you Brother Greco, or when I was missionary it was Elder Greco, or from baseball where there's usually a lot of the nicknames are just your last name. Most of the time it's just Greco.
Well, you've always been Nick to me. So moving forward in the movie, all the friends are together in Hoagie's house, portrayed by Ed Helms, and they're trying to talk about how they're going to meet or tag Jerry, not Jesse, Jerry. Just remember, Jerry Seinfeld, Jerry Pierce. That's who we're talking about. And Jerry is actually engaged to be married, and none of them have received an invitation. So they're a little hurt that they did not get an invitation. That being said, we have to talk about your wedding. I was invited to your wedding, but I never got the invitation to your, what was it, your wedding shower? Or
I don't remember. I know that you always talk about this, but I honestly don't remember. Our situation was different because I had obviously a lot of my friends and family here in Dallas. We got married in Utah, even though none of our families were at the time we're living in Utah. Marion was still living there, so it was just easier for her to plan everything there. And so you say that, I honestly don't remember. I don't remember if it was the shower. I don't remember if it was the wedding and the rehearsal itself.
It was the shower, because you said that the invitations had gone out, and I had told you, yeah, just tell me when it is and I'll be there. And I never got the invitation. And then I think it was either the day before or the day of, you called me and you're like, so are you going to be there? And I'm like, you never sent me the invitation. You never told me. And I was out of town. And I remember clearly that Graham and Allison, they were sick. Allison had strep throat or something like that, and she couldn't go. So we weren't there. And I've always felt really bad about that. But that's bringing up the past. We'll leave it in the past where it belongs. In this movie, Jerry didn't send any invitations, and we let her find out he knew that if he sent invitations, that he would have to spend the entire time trying to avoid being tagged. Here's my thing. Why would you choose to be married in May when you know that this is what you're doing?
Because otherwise there wouldn't be a movie.
That's true. Very true. But again, this was based in real life. So do you think that really happened, or do you think that was just part of the movie, part of the writers?
No, I think it was part of the writers. I think that, at the very end of the movie, and we can talk about it towards the end, but at the end of the movie, you get some of the real footage of the guys playing tag. And so it looked like it was probably a group of guys that maybe were still in the same town. You didn't get the sense that it was nearly as elaborate as it's portrayed in the movie, which I think is kind of one of the fun things for me. They make it fun. They make it interesting for a Hollywood story where the guys are traveling all over the place. But I will say this, we'll flash forward a little bit. The very first tag scene where the guys are at the country club, they find out from the dorky bartender that Jerry's going to be at the country club. And the first time that they go to get him, and Jerry goes through pause, and it goes through the breakdown of how he sees every move coming. I did not see it coming. I bust out laughing out loud. I thought that was so hilarious how they portrayed
that. It was very
through.
well done. If you've ever seen the movie Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr., this where he breaks down the fight blow by blow. Okay, this guy is gonna do this to me, so I'm gonna do this, and then this is what's gonna happen, so then I'm gonna do this. Jeremy Renner's character can anticipate exactly what's gonna happen, who is it, how he needs to avoid being tagged. And even the little montage that they have before this, when they're explaining to the reporter how Jerry has gone 30 years without ever being tagged, was hilarious. He's been faster than all of them. And my favorite scene is where they show him, they've got to be like in middle school or just starting high school. They were talking about if you ever corner Jerry, he turns into this feral animal. And they show them, they kind of corner him in a classroom, and he's right next to the overhead projector, and he ends up grabbing it and just chucking it at his friends. As, this guy could have killed them. That's how intense these guys play tag.
I thought a funny one, I think it was that same montage where it shows, I don't remember which character it was, but they're coming up on him like in a rainy phone booth, and then all of a sudden he's just like vanished, and they're like, we still to this day have no idea how he got out of there. Like, it's very far-fetched.
Yeah, it was John Hamm. It's this phone booth. Kiddos, for those of you who don't know what this is, a phone booth is a phone that was out in the middle of the street on a corner somewhere that you actually paid money. It's these little silver metallic discs that we used to carry around in our pockets. We didn't used to have cell phones. But the lights go out. It's like raining. It's in the middle of a parking lot. It's raining. There's not a car in sight. And John Hamm is sneaking up on him. And then the light goes out in the booth. And then Jeremy Renner's gone when the light turns back on.
Classic. It was really funny. Far-fetched, but it gives that mystique of, this guy is the best. He's kind of a wizard at playing tag, and they have no idea how they're going to tag him. And then you get to that scene where it was hilarious. He's duffel bag punching Nick from the New Girl's characters in the butt, and he pulls the black guy's pants down, and he's got a leopard thong on. It was hilarious.
It was. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember. There wasn't, I think that's the extent of the nudity. We saw a man's butt cheeks and a leopard print thong.
Yeah, it was, besides the language, which it was guy language. There's a lot of cussing, but it was pretty clean besides that. No nudity, no sexual content really.
Well, the first time when they got let's talk a little bit about this. Ed Helms' wife she pretends to be, I guess, like a receptionist or something at the country club, and she calls Jerry and says that their rehearsal dinner has been canceled due to overbooking, and that that they won't be able to refund them. Or she makes up this fake thing so that they can lure Jerry to the country club and tag him, right? And so they got the information from this dorky bartender that they've been talking about, who was this lifelong friend, they were that they grew up with, but he was never part of the group, right? So then that all happens. You have this huge, action scene where Jeremy Renner, like you said, was punching them and basically escapes without being tagged. And then we meet Jerry's fiance, and they have this thing that's called an amendment, and everybody has to agree to the amendment, which are rules throughout the game that you have to follow. And one of the rules was that, at certain events of this wedding, because it's a weekend that they're there for, they are not allowed to play the game. And so they set certain rules and certain time frames that tag is completely and totally off limits. So then they end up breaking into Jerry's house, and everybody's like, no, he's not going to be there. He's not going to be there. And this was the one sexual thing that I was like, okay, that was really
I did forget
weird
about that part. That was pretty crazy.
So Jerry has, in essence, booby-trapped his house, but it's not necessarily booby traps. They're looking for him in his house, and all of a sudden, all these TVs turn on, and they show Jerry, who is actually back at Hoagie's house, portrayed by Helms, and he's got Helms's little baby teddy bear, and he says, I wonder which one of us is going to come first, you or me, because he is going to ejaculate all over Ed Helms' little teddy bear, which again, it's guys being stupid. Nick, I know you and I have stupid conversations. I've never talked to you about that type of stuff. But like you, me, and Graham, we always talk about poop and stuff like that. But it's like you said, it's a guy movie. I don't think that it's necessarily just for guys. I think women will enjoy it too. But it just takes everybody back to that nostalgic time of just hanging out with your buddies and having a good time.
Yeah, I think that I forgot about that scene, and it was really funny because he never actually does anything, but it's definitely guy humor. It's one of the things my wife would scoff at it and say, that's just guy humor. She wouldn't. It's not as funny to them as it is to us, but yeah, that scene is really funny because it winds up that he sets up this big ruse in his own house. He builds like a model of Hoagie's bedroom, and so they go back to Hoagie's house. There's a big chase scene to try and get there first. They get there, and he's not even there. And you see that he had to set up in his basement the whole time.
Yeah, it was a replica.
Yeah,
like an exact replica. So I thought that was pretty funny. So let's fast forward a little bit. We keep going, and then they finally find out that Jerry has actually had a drinking problem. He's in AA. They surround the church that he's having his daily AA meeting. They lock all the doors, and they finally corner Jerry, and they're gonna get him, and he locks himself in the kitchen, and they're all like, look, you have to come out sooner or later because your wedding is today, and we're gonna get you. So he's locked in the kitchen. They're sitting outside the kitchen. All of a sudden, his fiance comes in. She's kind of somewhat dressed, I guess. You could tell that she was getting ready for the wedding. It needs to be stated that they find out that she's actually pregnant, which is why they're getting married. So then she's really upset because she thinks that her wedding is about to be ruined, all for this stupid game of tag. And so she's getting so upset that she ends up, cramping and saying that she's about to have a miscarriage. And then everything gets really real. And you kind of realize, like, oh my gosh, this is just a game. You can't take this thing too seriously. And this is really where the drama starts coming into this movie, because every comedy that you ever watch, there's always that one brief of drama to kind of balance everything out. So then Jerry comes out of the kitchen. He kind of pulls a truce, and he even threatens Callahan and says, if you come near me or my baby, I'm going to crush your windpipe. So then you kind of tell, like, oh my gosh, this is real. Like, this lady's having a miscarriage. It's, hours before her wedding, and nobody really knows what's going on. So then everybody kind of reconvenes at the headquarters, which is Hoagie's childhood home. And we find out that she faked it. She wasn't really pregnant. She wasn't having a miscarriage. All of this was a ruse that Jerry set up in case he ever got cornered before the wedding. And it needs to be stated that Jerry, I don't think we covered this, Nick, and correct me if I'm wrong. The reason Jerry didn't invite them is because he knew that they were going to come anyways to the wedding. And so that's why he had all of this planned. And you find out throughout the movie that this is how Jerry has been able to avoid being tagged for 30 years. He's able to anticipate the way that his friends think.
Yeah, I think he tells them, I don't remember if it was the country club scene at the beginning, that he knew that they would come anyway. So that's one of the reasons they didn't get invited. One of the funny kind of subplots throughout the movie that I thought was really funny that you see in the scene with his wife having the pains in her stomach like she's having the miscarriage is when Chili's character, who is Jake Johnson, he's kind of the off the hook, out of his mind character. But in every scene, he's talking about how everything is a setup, Jerry set up. When they're at the rehearsal dinner scene, he's talking about how, do you think that every person here is a paid actor? Jerry hired all these people, and he's the only one that in the real serious scene where she's going through the stomach pain, like she's talking about she's having a miscarriage, he's the only one that kind of pipes up and says, I think she's faking. This is crazy. And they're all kind of, dude, this is not the right time. This is serious. But you see how he carries that kind of loose screw type of thinking throughout the movie, and he winds up being right, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, and he carries that throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, every scene he's talking about, if Jerry just hired these people, the whole thing is, what did he call it? He kept calling it the Truman Show. This whole thing's a Truman Show. Everyone's an actor.
Oh, yeah. That's what I loved about him. He played that character just perfectly. So we're finally at the headquarters. It's hours before the wedding. And this is the first time that we see Hoagie kind of lose his cool. He's kind of given up, and he's just accepted the fact that, after 30 years, Jerry is going to make it 30 years without having been tagged, and he's going to retire having never been tagged. He kind of loses it, and he can't believe that his friend took it to that level to fake a pregnancy and still go through with his wedding, just not to be tagged. So they all show up at the wedding. They're all sitting in the last row, which one of my favorite scenes happens. They're sitting there and they're like, okay, so what's the difference between Episcopalian and Jake Johnson's character says, like, they don't eat fish, and they're like, no, that's pescatarian. He's like, yeah, whatever, it's all religious anyways. That just reminds me, I have a coworker, her name's Liz, shout out Liz. She and I started together where we work right now, and she started interviewing for a new position. And she comes up to me and tells me, Carlos, be sure to pray to your Muslim God, okay? And I was like, Muslim God? What are you talking about? She goes, aren't you Muslim? And I said, no, I'm Mormon. And she goes, Muslim, Mormon, same thing. I'm like, what? It's two completely different religions. But that scene just made me think of that. And again, it's just making you realize the things that you have with your friends.
Yeah, that was funny. And that's kind of, we get to where that is the culmination scene where Ed Helms' character, Hoagie, overhears the caterer, I think it was. They don't really make it clear, but talking about how they're going to release the doves, and they find out that there's going to be a however minuscule window between the actual ending of the ceremony and the start of the reception where they can tag him. And that's kind of the culmination scene where he realizes that he's going to have this small window, and he decides that he's going to, screw it being in front of everyone, screw it being his best friend's wedding. He's going to go up there and go for the tag.
Exactly. So then he actually goes for it, and Ed Helms, flings himself at Jerry. Jerry just steps out of the way, and then the priest is knocked over. Hoagie is unconscious on the floor, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, call a doctor, call a doctor. And then the whole thing starts over again, where it's like, wait, is he faking it? Is he just waiting for Jerry to get closer to him? And then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a second drama development. Hoagie's character actually has cancer, and he doesn't expect to live until the following year. And it's actually Jerry's character never said that he was going to retire. Hoagie was just trying to go out with a bang this last go around before he passed away because of the cancer. And then all his friends find out that, that's what was going on. Jerry is talking to Hoagie via FaceTime because he still can't decide if this is real or not. And then we find out, no, this is actually real. This is real. Hoagie's character does have cancer. He is dying. And then in walks Jerry because he was talking via FaceTime, from the hall. And he finally lets them tag him. And then we find out that the game of tag, despite it being the object of the game running away from everybody, you're running away from everybody just so that you can become closer to everybody. And I kind of find it funny and ironic that it comes full circle, because when we first start the movie and John Hamm's character is being interviewed, he keeps giving these ironic metaphors for his company. He says, we're such a global company, but we're very local. And we're such a big company, but we're so small. And he gives these metaphors, and it just all comes full circle right there, because Ed Helms' character starts talking about how Jerry always felt like the outcast. Well, he felt like the outcast because he was always running away from them. And these others were constantly tagging each other, and they became closer because they all together were trying to catch up to Jerry. Did you get that from that moment?
Yeah, I think it brings it together really cool at the end. And so you get, the sense, and as silly as it sounds, it gives you a chance to kind of think about your own life. These guys, they're playing tag. It's a silly movie, a lot of dumb humor, but then at the end, it comes together where, I think that everyone is just trying to have a good time with their friends, have a good time with their family, do things that bring people closer together. And you get that sense that it's about the relationship with the friends. And, it was sad. And the movie ends where you don't really ever know what happens to Helms' character, but I thought that it was a good twist. You didn't see it coming. And I think that it made sense throughout the movie. I liked it. It's sad. It makes you think about your own mortality and how, we never know what's going to happen with us. And then I think that it's good to think about that sometimes, because we don't think about it, but you think about, who are the people in my life that I should be playing tag with, that I should be having these games with, I should be trying to spend more time with. And I think that the movie did a really good job of ending that way, and not just being a funny movie, but leaving you with that thought of who are the people in my life that I need to be trying to play this silly game of tag with. Yeah.
And so here's the final plot twist that we had. They make a final amendment. So Ed Helms' wife has never actually been able to play, because one of the rules that they set up at the beginning when they were younger is no girls allowed. So the final amendment is to allow girls to play. And then they tag her, and then they have this huge, showdown in the hospital, running up and down the halls, tagging each other. And that's really where the movie starts to end. Now, this is where I had a big problem with it, and not necessarily a big problem, but I've been thinking about it since last night, Nick. This poor guy, this poor dorky bartender, for 30 years has been trying to play this stupid game of tag. All of a sudden, at the very end, they just let the wives play. And this poor guy is over there still, waiting. I wonder if they ever let him finally join in, since they let the girls play.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. The guy is just kind of the dorky second character. I think that it's funny to go back. I think, when you're growing up, you have your groups of friends, whether it be through school, through sports, or through activities. But there's always the people that they're not really in your friend circle. They're there, but it's kind of like he's the guy that you never want to invite to the sleepover. You never want to invite to go out. So I didn't care. The dorky guy, he's supposed to be outside the circle.
Yeah. So all in all, great movie. I loved it for its simplicity. There was a couple of scenes in there that I thought were a little too far-fetched, which is why I'm giving this a rate of 8. Based on what you were saying, Nick, you're going to give this a solid 9. all in all, it's going to be a great movie. Definitely worth it to go see it. I think, maybe once I see it again, maybe I'll like it a little bit more, but I'm going to stick with my 8. What are your final thoughts of the movie?
Yeah, my final thoughts, Carlos, are, I don't know if it will ever be considered one of the greatest movies of all time or even this year. But for me, I can definitely see it being one of those movies that it's an easy watch. It's always going to be funny. It's always going to be entertaining. It's one of those movies that 10, 15 years from now, you could see it on TBS and you turn it on because it's funny in the background. It's one I think that's going to age well. It's not going to win any Oscars. It's not going to win any awards. But for me, it's going to go down in that class of movies. Like I said, I keep going back to like your Wedding Crashers. Movies that I think that are timelessly funny, that are going to be funny years from now because it's a good plot. You got your group of friends. Everyone can relate to that. They're playing games, trying to stay young. Everyone can relate to that. And then, like we've just been talking about, they tie it together at the end where the meaning is a little bit more than just the game of tag. And so I think that this one will play well for a long time.
And I hate to break it to you, but that is the definition of a GOAT movie. So if you think it's going to stand the test of time, I guess we're just going to have to wait to see what the listeners think. That's going to do it for this edition of GOAT Movies. I really want to give a big thanks to my buddy Nick. Nick, thanks for joining me on this podcast today.
Carlos, glad to be on. Like I said, I feel like I've been there a little bit from the beginning since you got the email from Gray Drake and you went down to the Kid Craddock show and you got the shout out on the air, and I've seen you take this from idea to doing it. And so glad that we were able to actually hook up on a time and get this thing done. Glad to be on the show for the first time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining. And again, if you guys want to join me on the podcast, all you have to do is shoot me an email, goatmoviespc@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at goatmoviespc. Be sure to rate this podcast, comment on it, subscribe, and share it so that we can make more movie podcasts about this. Thanks again for joining, everybody, and we will see you next week.
Then begin, hold whatever pose you're in, pose in, everybody pose. Get a partner, then begin.